When I first started trying to build something online, I thought the hardest part would be learning skills. I assumed the challenge would be technical. If I could learn enough about content, marketing, and audience building, I thought success would simply become a matter of time. What I didn't expect was how much of the journey would happen inside my own head. Nobody really talks about that part. They talk about strategies, tactics, and tools, but they rarely talk about what uncertainty actually feels like when you're living through it. At the beginning, everything feels exciting because every possibility still exists. Every video could take off. Every idea could work. Every project feels like it might eventually become the thing that changes your life. That excitement creates a hidden expectation. You start believing that progress will be obvious. You assume effort and results will arrive together, and that if you're working hard enough, you'll be able to see proof that the work is paying off. But building something online rarely works like that. Most of the time, the effort arrives first, and the evidence arrives later. Sometimes much later. The strange thing is that nobody can tell you how much later. There isn't a countdown clock. There isn't a roadmap telling you exactly when things will start making sense. So you keep working anyway. You create, learn, improve, and experiment while having absolutely no idea whether any of it is helping. That's the part that surprised me most. I realized pretty quickly that uncertainty isn't something you overcome once. It becomes part of the process itself. Every day brings the same unanswered questions back to the surface. Am I getting better? Am I wasting my time? Am I moving closer to something meaningful, or am I just keeping myself busy? Those questions start showing up far more often than most people expect. The difficult part is that those questions sound reasonable. They don't sound dramatic. They sound logical, which makes them much harder to ignore. I've noticed that ambitious people seem especially vulnerable to this. When you're actively trying to improve your situation, uncertainty doesn't feel neutral. It feels like something that needs to be solved immediately. That's when you start searching for reassurance. You check views, subscribers, followers, sales, comments, and engagement. Not because the numbers matter that much individually, but because you're looking for evidence. You aren't really checking the metrics. You're checking whether you should still believe in what you're building. That's a much heavier question than most people realize. The internet makes this problem worse because it constantly exposes you to outcomes. Every day you're shown somebody else's success story, somebody else's growth, somebody else's breakthrough moment. What you rarely see are the months before that breakthrough happened. You don't see the uncertainty, the repetition, or the frustration. You only see the moment that made the journey look worthwhile. Eventually, your brain starts comparing timelines without meaning to. You compare your beginning to somebody else's middle. You compare your struggle to somebody else's result. And once that habit forms, progress starts feeling smaller than it really is. Learning stops feeling valuable because it doesn't immediately produce visible outcomes. That's something I genuinely didn't expect. I thought building online would make me focus more on creating. Instead, I found myself becoming obsessed with measuring. Every number started feeling important. Views, impressions, reach, growth rates. Tiny changes began affecting my mood far more than they probably should have. The irony is that most of those numbers don't actually tell you very much in isolation. Yet when you're emotionally invested, every number feels like a verdict on whether you're succeeding or failing. Eventually, I realized that the real challenge wasn't learning new skills. The real challenge was continuing before I had proof that those skills were leading anywhere meaningful. Because most meaningful progress is invisible while it's happening. That's true for businesses, fitness, careers, relationships, and almost everything else that matters. The work usually appears before the results do. The problem is that modern life trains us to expect immediate feedback. We send a message and get a reply. We order something and track its delivery. We post something and see a reaction. Building something online doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you put weeks or months into a project and receive almost no feedback at all. That's where things start becoming psychologically difficult. People often say success requires discipline. I think that's only part of the story. Plenty of people are disciplined for short periods of time. What they struggle with is remaining disciplined when the outcome remains uncertain. It's one thing to work hard when you're confident it's working. It's another thing entirely when you genuinely don't know. That's why I think uncertainty is one of the most underrated obstacles in modern ambition. Most people don't quit because they're incapable. They quit because the timeline becomes longer than expected. And when the timeline stretches, doubt begins filling the space. Every day without obvious progress feels like new evidence that something might be wrong. The strange thing is that progress often continues anyway. Skills continue developing. Knowledge continues accumulating. Experience continues compounding beneath the surface. The challenge is that none of those things feel exciting while they're happening. They feel ordinary. They feel slow. They feel insignificant compared to the dramatic success stories we consume every day. That's why so many people abandon projects just before they become useful. They mistake invisible progress for no progress. They assume that because they can't see momentum, momentum doesn't exist. I've caught myself doing this repeatedly, looking for signs that things are working instead of focusing on whether I'm improving, measuring outcomes instead of measuring growth. But outcomes arrive on their own schedule. Growth happens on yours. That's an important distinction I wish I understood earlier. Because if your motivation depends entirely on outcomes, you'll spend most of the journey disappointed. Outcomes are delayed. Growth is available every single day. The creators, entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs, and builders who survive the longest seem to understand this. They stop treating every result as a verdict. They start treating the process itself as the goal. That doesn't mean they stop caring about success. It means they stop requiring constant evidence that success is coming. They learn how to continue without reassurance. And honestly, I think that's what building something online ultimately teaches people. Not marketing, not content creation, not business strategy. It teaches patience. It teaches resilience. It teaches you how to keep moving while important questions remain unanswered. Right now, I still don't know where this journey ends. I don't know which ideas will work, which projects will succeed, or what this eventually becomes. But I do know that the person who started this journey would have expected certainty long before now. Instead, what I've found is something very different. I've found that progress is often invisible, that momentum is often delayed, and that meaningful things usually take far longer than we want them to. Maybe that's why so many people never build the things they dream about. Not because they lack talent, not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack opportunity. Maybe they simply underestimate how long uncertainty lasts. And maybe success belongs to the people who learn how to keep building anyway. Because eventually, every person trying to create something reaches the same moment. Nobody is watching. Nothing appears to be growing. The future feels impossible to predict. And in that moment, there's really only one question that matters. Can you keep going before you have proof? Because if you can, you're already doing something most people never manage to do. You're continuing through the part of the story where almost everyone else quietly disappears.